Light a campfire, and everyone's a storyteller. Join us for some thought provoking and beyond fireside chats.
Isaac, thank you so much for joining me here today.
No, thank you. Thank you, Pastor, for inviting me.
Isaac, you are the head of methodology for Africa Foundation, and you've been with the foundation for a very long time, since 1994. Before we start going, chatting through what exactly it is that you do with foundation and exactly what their methodology is like, can you just tell us a little bit about your background? What were you doing before you started off with foundation, and what was it that attracted you to this project that was beginning at and beyond Pinder right about that time, and that would eventually turn out to be Africa Foundation?
Mm, mm. Yes, Pastor. So I come from a small village called Gwangwanase. It's just north of Kinda, just close to the border with Mozambique and Kosi Bay, if you can locate it in the map. I grew up in that area, and started working for a project called Manguzi Community Program. This was based in development. We were actually doing community development in the rural setup with different schools. The funding was actually, it was a World Vision sponsored project. So during my years in Manguzi community program, which was about 7 in total, I came across quite a number of disturbing issues which actually related to conservation and community. So in my interaction with the community, would actually come across very big conflict between community and conservation authorities, which at the time was under the Bureau of Natural Resources, which was the KwaZulu government, a leg of conservation authority. And because of that, I think my conscience was quite heightened in terms of just the kind of injustices that were actually taking place. I worked there for that 7 years, and I moved on. I joined the University of Zululand to lead their research in agriculture in one of the districts that I was given to actually lead. We were doing low input research and
Mm-hmm.
development in the region to actually try and understand to what extent can we utilize low input and still yield much higher returns in the agriculture setup, which was part of the University of Zululand's research for their agricultural department. So from there, I actually then moved to a project that was called African Child Care, which was primarily looking at, developing early childhood education centers for the greater part of KwaZulu-Natal. And this is where I actually came across, it was during, my engagement and my work that I did come across Sister Africa then, which is now called and Beyond, because I was actually raising funds, trying to look at broadening our network. I came across, Sister Africa at the time, and they were looking at establishing early childhood education program at Pinda, starting all those early years. I think Sister Africa at the time was already always in my mind because I knew what they were trying to do in trying to bridge the gap
Mm-hmm.
between conservation and community, which was a very difficult process at the time because nobody actually saw that as a possibility at all. Conservation at the time was just about putting fences around the protected area, put patrols, and that was it. So that's really what was the status quo at the time. And what really attracted me was this organization burst into the equation, trying to explore new paradigms of actually trying to bring the community into conservation and vice versa. In other words, to try and normalize the relationship that was not there between conservation and community. And the animosity between the two was not just confined to my space in Gwangwanas when I grew up. You still have Natal Park Sport. We still had no relationship at all with the community. So conservation was completely strange for communities. And therefore, when I got an opportunity to actually come and play a role in that space of normalization of the relationship between conservation and community, for me, it was a wonderful opportunity that I could not turn down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what really attracted me because this new organization, this new company, was on the verge of unraveling a new paradigm that says community and conservation should live side by side, and there's no conservation without community, and vice versa. So that is really what attracted me to actually join to say Africa at the time, which as we know now is and beyond an Africa Foundation.
Mm-hmm. So, you very justifiably speak that it was a very new paradigm at the time. These days, I think a great deal or almost all conservation projects or game reserves sort of acknowledge the fact that the buy-in of local communities is absolutely crucial if they have to succeed. But at the time, it was a very, very new concept. And as you said, obviously, in the areas where you grew up and elsewhere, there was a lot of history and
Absolutely.
quite a relationship of antagonism almost to overcome. Obviously, one of the first tasks you must have been part of the team that had to grow and
Yeah,
strengthen that
yeah,
relationship
yeah.
between and beyond and between Pinda as a reserve and the communities that surrounded it. What were some of the challenges that you faced during this time?
The challenges that we faced, that I faced at the time, was a lack of trust. Communities viewed anything conservation with a lot of suspicion because, as I say, there was no relationship to speak about. Conservation areas were previously communal land where people were pushed out without compensation or with little compensation, if any at all, at the time. So communities that lived alongside those kind of areas, especially at Pinda, still harbored that kind of animosity and that kind of hard feelings towards conservation because it was seen firstly as a bastion where only few white people can actually go and have fun and had nothing to do with the communities firstly, but secondly, in some cases, Pinda per se, you had communities that used to live in in what is now a game reserve. Some of their ancestral graveyards are still inside. They saw themselves being deprived an opportunity to actually really be part of that, which is which is in their ancestral land. And therefore, when you deal with the people that have that kind of a mindset, anything that you're actually trying to do would be viewed with a lot of suspicion, if not just outright negativity. And that's the kind of challenges that we faced. So we actually had to demonstrate what we were talking about by action rather than just by talking. And therefore, it actually meant
Mm-hmm.
that we knew that we are starting from the bottom of the ladder. Most of the organizations that were playing in that space, conservation authorities, saw us just like mavericks that are actually trying to be smart, that didn't know how things are done in that conservation community space. And nobody actually wanted to come on board with us to actually say, well, let's try this and see if it can work, because we knew that long term, this is the future. But nobody actually saw it at the time. So the
Mm-hmm.
difficulty was twofold. One, conservation authorities did not believe in what we were trying to do. But the second part was that, and the most critical one, was that the community actually didn't think that we were sincere and honest because nobody had tried it before. And so they viewed our action as just another means to maybe get more land. In fact, some of them actually told in my face during those engagements that, well, don't waste our time. Just tell us how much more land you want, because that's what exactly you're coming to do here. You're not really
Mm-hmm.
coming to develop us. We know your modus operandi and your motives are just to get more land. People have actually we've been pushed back to actually get the land under conservation. So it was extremely hostile and extremely dangerous. So those are some of the things, stereotypes, difficult attitudes that we actually had to overcome to really try and win the hearts and the minds of the community to say
Mm-hmm.
we indeed are sincere. We can work together to actually find solution to this.
You mentioned, when you spoke, you said that there was a long term goal and a long term focus in mind. The whole process sounds like something that necessarily would have had to take a lot of time. Was that perhaps one of the challenges that you faced? Was there pressure to deliver quickly, or were both sides sort of willing to take the time to invest in the relationship and see what would happen, basically?
The community did not really have anything to lose. I mean, for them, it was a
Mm-hmm.
question really of pushing back. They did not know what they did not know, and therefore all they saw was these people now approaching them for no reason whatsoever, other than what they thought was to try and get more land. They had no obligation at all to kind of really try and help build the relationship. So it was our role to really demonstrate, because we needed them more than they needed us at the time, because we knew where we wanted to take this relationship to. But also, from our point of view,
Mm-hmm.
CC Africa at the time, there was obviously, as a business, you can understand that business operating at a different level. Each community meeting must actually have some kind of outcomes that are working towards a particular objective or particular goal. And if those meetings are not taking place because the community don't see the value in actually coming to those meetings, they're frustrating the process, then you actually had a problem, because being in between, if I go to my supervisor at the time, I think it was Les Carlisle, that I was working with, go to him and say, well, this week I've got A, B, C, D, E, F. I've got five things that I've planned, and all of those are like meetings. And at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the week, you can only report about one meeting that was successful. It would be very frustrating, because they looked at it as a waste of time, and therefore I had to play that role of not only bringing the community on board, but also ensuring that my colleagues actually understand that this process is going to be slow and painful. And at times you'd actually have a problem where of trust, from your own colleagues, because they start looking at you like, are you really serious about this? Are you really sure you know what you are doing, or you actually just wasting our time? So it was a very difficult process and a very slow one. From both parts, from both parts, the community would not. You would go call a meeting, and they would don't pitch up, or they pitch up at the time that they like, and the outcome of the meeting is completely haywire. It's really nothing to write home about. And you go back and talk about it, and they look at you and like, do you know? Do you really understand what you're doing? Or we just wasting our time here? So it was one of those very very difficult tasks that I had to perform at the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, Isaac, as it stands now, the Africa Foundation has got a very specific methodology that it follows for projects. Obviously, you were there at the time when this was
Yeah,
sort of started off and was being
yes,
developed. Can you tell us a little bit more, first of all, what this methodology is, and also how
yeah.
it developed over time, and why that specific way? What are the benefits, and why do you think that this
The
works?
methodology, simply put, is our little handbook, really, that define how we engage with community in this community development space. And it came about as a result of all those many long years, long days that we spent with the community. And I think that I like to call it, was paying our school fees. Because all what is contained in our methodology
Mm-hmm.
today was as a result of listening very carefully. And mind you, when I joined Africa Foundation, I already had almost 12 years of experience in community development. But none of my experience would have been, well,
Yes.
I was partly prepared for what I was going to go into, but the hostility and the depth of the problem was such that my experience was not sufficient to actually just go in and crack it. Other than understanding that we needed the community more than they needed us at the time. So the methodology was based on a very honesty and openness and transparency, and listening to what the community had to say. And as a result of that, we learned to actually understand that community must actually lead. So our projects must actually be led by the community. In fact, it's their projects must be led by them, and that participation must be at the heart of everything that they do. In other words, we can't actually just come in and drop a project because we think that we know what is good for the community. We actually had to pull back, even in circumstances where we thought we knew what the solutions could have been, and let the community take that center stage in terms of leading what needed to be done. We actually had to ensure that the community buy in what we're actually trying to do. So we learned throughout the process that you can't actually walk into the community and tell them what you think, but you must listen to what they have to say. So the methodology, in a sense, for us is, as I said, is a handbook that actually just define how we actually engage the community. For a very long time, we've seen NGOs, NPOs come in and drop projects that become a failure simply because they did not actually take the time to listen to what the community has to say. They did not consult. They did not bring everybody on board to actually say how then do we work together to actually achieve a particular objective, because they are in a rush for the time. If it's a 5 year project, then that must be developed within that 5 year period. But we knew that ours was a long term, and therefore we could not actually restrict it, by putting time frames and timelines to it. We actually had to engage. So the methodology actually comes from all of those learnings. You listen to them, you don't tell them, you don't impose your solutions, you don't build infrastructure because you think it's necessary, because it's not going to be sustainable if you do it that way. You journey with them. You let them, you allow them to take the lead. That is for us our way of actually saying, how do we contribute to building the dignity of the people? How do we contribute towards ensuring that we respect the fact that having little does not translate to no knowledge or no wisdom at all, which is a mistake most people do. Because if you walk into a community, you see them hungry, you see them without resources, the perception might be that, and there's a danger that people actually make that assumption that it therefore means that these people are not wise enough, or these people are not intellectually enough, and that is the notion we actually have to try and dispel, because the wisdom in the community and the intellect and the assets the community have is what have sustained them up to a moment when you actually come to meet them. So you can't overlook that or underestimate the power of the resilience they have
Mm-hmm.
before you actually engage them. So the methodology it actually try and encompasses all of that and say when we engage with the communities, these are the areas we must make sure that is sacrosanct in a way. We will not try and dictate to the community. We will not try and tell them or rush them to actually find a particular conclusion. We will actually allow them the space and the process to actually lead and do it in their pace. Of course, we understand the donors actually want reports, that everybody else want movement, and therefore we try and balance the two to make sure that there is progress, but at the same time we allow the community to actually take that kind of lead. So this is why we say we work with them rather than for them, because if you work for them, you actually just think for them, you do for them, you do everything for them. But if you do with them, you actually participate in their own process, and therefore you allow the space to be led by them, and therefore the buy-in and the sustainability of the project is much more enhanced than a process where you come in and parachute solutions, because once you walk out, project will actually crumble, and they are not sustainable, and all of that. So that is really, in a nutshell, what the methodology trying to seeks to do.
Mm-hmm.
It collaborates with the community, with the stakeholders. It talks about collaboration with the stakeholders in the area, whether it's a government department. For instance, if we're actually going to be building a school, there's no way we're actually going to build a school knowing fully well that we will depend on the government to bring in the teachers, to bring in the textbooks, the desks, and all of that, and operate the classroom. If we know that, we must therefore make an effort as a matter of importance that we actually talk to the government department before we even build the school, because then once they've actually say, yes, indeed, the school is necessary in that area, they already kind of put together a budget to actually, bring in all of those required, services that will actually ensure that the school operates when we hand it over to the community. So that's really what the methodology speaks to.
It's such a crucial little distinction at the heart of it. And if you spend any time at all
Yeah,
with anybody from Africa Foundation, you will always hear them say, we work with communities, we don't work for communities.
yeah,
And that's really at the
absolutely,
heart of it.
absolutely.
Mm. Isaac, thank you so much. It has been really, really inspirational listening to you today. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on and chat to me.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to actually share just our experiences, and hopefully as we continue to share this, more and more people will be inspired to actually try and do likewise wherever they may be. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to And Beyond Fireside Chats. Don't forget to subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. If you have any comments or feedback, or would like to suggest a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, drop us an email at firesidechats@andbeyond.com. We'd love to hear from you.